Welcome to the Bucky Brooks Show. I'm Bucky Brooks, your host, and we are talking all things football. And look, coming off of Black Monday, we are in the season of change with a lot of comings and goings in the National Football League. And so we're going to break all those things down today. And before we get into the hirings and firings and what's going on throughout the NFL landscape, let's send a shout out to our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered. Every game, every play, every win. Bet online, the game starts here. And guys, as much as I would love to say that the game starts here in a new year, the game has ended for some of my colleagues in the National Football League. Black Monday always coincides with the end of the NFL season. So that means that a lot of guys get pink slips based on the way their team performed. Fair or not, Black Monday, the first Monday after the NFL year, is when a lot of guys are dismissed and ownerships and leaders decide they want to change the course of the program based on those results. And so what we're seeing are a number of jobs that are available, head coaches and general managers. Let's talk about some of the head coaching jobs that are available. So as of now, we're talking about the New Orleans Saints, the Chicago Bears, the New York Jets, the Jacksonville Jaguars, New England Patriots, and Las Vegas Raiders are all looking for head coaches. Each year, we see about 6 to 8 teams flip over the league because this is a league where people want to win. They want to win right away. And if you're not getting it done, owners have shown not as much patience when it comes to getting the results on the field. The challenge when it comes to that, when you're always turning over the leadership model, is how do you sustain or build success when you don't really have enough time to enact your own program? We think about the draft process. We think about free agency. The thought or the notion of turning things around quickly, it can happen for some, but it doesn't happen for others, depending on the state of the program. Regardless of that, there are owners and there's an expectation on fan bases that, look, you're expected to go from worst to first in any person who's a prospective head coach has to understand that the league, NFL, stands for not for long. And when you step into those situations, you better make sure it's the right job, that you can win with what you have until you get what you want. Otherwise, you're quickly going to hit the unemployment line. And so there we talk about 6 head coaching vacancies being up and available. And then we have 2 GM spots that are available. The New York Jets are looking for a GM to go with their head coaching search, and the Tennessee Titans moved on from Ran Carthon. They have the number 1 pick, and so they're going to have someone else lead the rebuilding program with Brian Callahan installed as the head coach. When I first got into the league, not only as a player but as a scout in 2000, they used to always talk about the volatility of the league. You were less likely to move around quickly if you were on the personnel side, because the personnel side is about the vision, the long-range vision of the program. Your job is to build it and sustain it over a period of time. Coaches think about the here and now, and their job is year to year. My job is to take what I have this year and find a way to maximize it each year. The next year is the same thing. Whereas the general manager is about building a program that can always be in the conversation or always be in contention for the tournament and beyond. What we're seeing is an increased level of volatility throughout the league that puts everyone a bit on notice. And what used to be a situation where it was the GM would pick the head coach and they would be in alignment, and that alignment would probably lead to a shared vision, we're now seeing people operate on different timelines. Some teams have the general manager in place and they're searching for the head coach. Some teams may have a head coach in place and they're searching for the general manager. And the trick in dealing with those situations, how do you get everyone on the same page? What is important when we talk about championship franchises, teams that are always going to be able to compete at the highest level, is there's alignment from top to bottom. And when I mean alignment from top to bottom, from ownership to front office to coaching staff to the individual coaches and players, the expectations are outlined. The cultural values are outlined. They're set by the owner, who tells the person in charge of the football program, here are the things that are important to me. Here's how I want to see my team operate on the field. I have a high level of respect for like discipline, attention to detail. I want to see great execution. I want to see effort. Whatever those things that are important to the owner, those things should be conveyed to the football people. And then the football people are responsible for making that vision come to life. People will talk about culture and those things, and all of that fits into the culture, the standards and expectations of the program. But it's really important, in my opinion, that the owner sets that standard and then everyone follows through on that to carry out the vision of the higher ups. What we're seeing, though, we're seeing owners who don't talk about the process in that light. We've heard owners have pressers at the end of the season where the things that they're talking about have little to do with establishing the culture and the values within the building, and more to do with, oh, I want to see plays called this way. Oh, we need to build around the quarterback, and it needs to look like this, and not predictability. I need to see more than just vanilla schemes and tactics and those things. And I'm telling you, if you fall into those categories as a fan, you're doing it wrong. The head coach, the team builder, has little to do with the tactics, more to do with the relationships and the talent. Never get this confused. The NFL is about the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's. And even though we get excited about what we see on Sundays, the great plays and those things, ultimately, the teams that win consistently typically have the most talented teams. And they're the most talented teams that play together. That is a trick. So you have a collection of individual talents, but if they're not playing together, they're not going to beat a team that is really connected and together, but also is talented. And I'll say this because I want everyone to understand this. Every team in the league, all 32 teams, have a handful of blue chip players. Now, the championship teams typically have anywhere from 8 to 12 blue chip players, meaning players that are regarded as top 5, top 10 talents at their position throughout the league. The more blue chip players you assemble, the greater the odds of your team being the last one standing when we get to the end of the tournament. So it's important that when we begin to talk about the draft and free agency and those things, when we talk about players and we're projecting them out, you must keep the standard high. As much as we talk about guys being good players, the goal is to get great players. And you have to have 8 to 12 great players to be able to compete at that level. We'll talk about it when we get to the end of the season. We wrap up the Super Bowl. We'll do kind of a reflection and we'll look back at the teams that kind of made it to the end. And I can guarantee you that when we look at those rosters, we will be able to identify 8 to 12 players on those teams that were worthy of being considered blues across the league. But that's something that we'll get to, but that should be the standard, and that should be how we're viewing these roles in these situations as we're looking at the head coaching vacancies and the general manager openings that are now available. What I want to do is, before we talk about like what we should look for in head coaching candidates and what we should be talking about in general manager candidates and the guys that could fill those roles, I kind of want to talk about something that is personal to me in terms of some of the guys that have lost their jobs. As a former player, a guy who spent 12 years in the league, 5 years as a player, 12 years as a scout, I understand and respect the fraternity of the players. And nothing makes me happier than to see former players getting gigs, to see the job that Dan Campbell has done, to see what Todd Bowles has done, to see some of the other former players who have been able to keep their teams playing at a high level. I love and appreciate that, because for the longest time, people didn't believe that former players could lead a franchise, lead an organization, and have a level of success because there was a stigma or a stereotype about the guys that played in between the lines compared to those that were outside the lines but made all the decisions. So I'm always going to advocate and rally behind former players getting those opportunities. Today, I'm going to say it's a sad day, though, because when you look at the dismissals, it's not lost upon me that 3 guys that lost their jobs were former players. And I would say in each of those situations, they operated on very short leashes. Antonio Pierce, Jerod Mayo, and Ran Carthon were all let go Black Monday or shortly thereafter. And what I would say in each of those situations, they were set up to fail. They weren't set up in prime situations that you could have an opportunity to immediately turn it around and have the level of success that ownership would want. Jerod Mayo steps in for the greatest coach of all time in Bill Belichick. And at the end of Bill Belichick's tenure, we saw how bad the Patriots were. Jerod Mayo steps into that without a significant upgrade in roster. Yet, when he finishes 4-13, we're told that he failed to meet expectations. And that's true. No one wants to have a team that has a losing record. But I don't know what we necessarily expected with the team as bad as it was. Now, I will say this in watching the Patriots. Certainly wasn't as tight, as detailed, as buttoned up as it was under Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is a master tactician, a terrific strategist who understands how to take what he has and put it in a position to win, regardless of whether the talent lines up with his opponent. For Jerod Mayo to step into that and to be compared to Bill Belichick was something that he never was going to live up to. We can talk about the tiffs and the egregious areas that he may have had in press conferences, some of the things that when it comes to time management and those things. But what I would tell you is every head coach has to learn on the job. It is rare that most guys have it figured out their first year on the job. What you hope is that you're able to win enough to give yourself enough time to figure out how to operate and manage the game from the sideline. Didn't happen for Jerod Mayo. Didn't happen for Antonio Pierce, even though he had a few games the previous year as the interim coach. He is let go after a disappointing season in Las Vegas, a season in which you saw Devontae Adams get traded away, a season where they didn't have a quarterback from the jump. Garner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, no one would tell you that those guys are franchise quarterbacks that you build a team around. And you had a lot of not dysfunction, but you didn't have a complete roster upheaval or a reworked roster that would legitimately give you a chance to win. But in watching that team down the stretch, you saw them play hard. You saw them give the effort that you wanted to see. The execution wasn't always there, but you could see this team was a tough out when it came to those things. To me, when you're looking at it and you're judging the team, you're trying to judge it on the trajectory of the squad. Is the squad trending upward? Are they flat? Are they downward? I would say that the team was playing hard, and so they were on an upward trajectory, particularly with the roster that they had. In Ran Carthon, we'll talk about a young general manager who really got caught up in a bit of a power struggle. When you think about John Robinson being let go, Mike Vrabel is there. Mike Vrabel then is paired up with Ran Carthon. The next year, Mike Vrabel is gone. Ran Carthon is given an extension and an elevated title. They hire Brian Callahan. They have the season play out this year where they're really hamstrung by cap. They bring veterans in. The draft picks don't necessarily pan out, particularly Will Levis. And before you know it, boom, Ran Carthon is gone. 2 years, but 2 years is not enough to completely flip a team. But in a league in which you're judged on wins and losses, the owner felt like Ran Carthon and the program didn't win enough. They weren't able to kind of plot out a direction where they were going to get better. So they wanted to pull the plug on the Ran Carthon experiment, even though they just gave him a 4-year extension. And I know people will talk about the money and those things. Hey, he has money, he's cool. But when you're talking about one of 32 jobs as a head coach or a general manager, the odds of it coming back around are unlikely in those situations. So sad day for some former players. Also, Doug Pederson being a former player, being let go. That also troubles me. But what I hope for all of these guys, they somehow find their way not only back into the league, but eventually they find their way back into leadership positions. But let's talk about those leadership positions and what we should be looking for in those positions. I would say that I've been fortunate as a player and as executive that I've been surrounded by some of the best coaches that you can find. One of my coaches, my former coaches, Marv Levy, is in the Hall of Fame. I had a couple coaches that were Super Bowl winners in Tom Coughlin and John Gruden. I had a 200-game winner in Marty Schottenheimer, who, look, one of only 8 coaches to have 200 wins in the league. And oh, by the way, I forgot to shout out Mike Holmgren, who also won a Super Bowl. So 1 Hall of Famer, 3 Super Bowl champs, and 1 coach with 200 wins. I feel like I've seen what greatness looks like on the sideline. And so I want to give you my criteria for what we should be looking for when we're talking about these head coaching candidates. Number one thing that we're looking for when it comes to a head coach has to be leadership. I know people will talk about it. It's overblown. People will talk about leader of men. But what we're talking about really is a culture builder, someone who understands clearly what they want, clearly how to get everyone in the building on the same page. They set and establish standards that are at a championship level, and they hold everyone in the building to that standard. Players, coaches, executives, everyone working around the team, you're expected to operate at a championship level. And the reason you're able to do that is because you are a great communicator. Part of being a leader and a culture builder is being an excellent communicator, meaning you're willing to share the hard truth with any and everybody to make sure that you get the performance up to the level that you need to operate as a championship team. So we talk about leadership, culture building, communication. That is essential to being a terrific head coach. But the other part that is necessary and important to being a head coach is being a problem solver. When you are the head coach, the thing that players look to from the head coach is, can you solve the problems? We are having an issue, offense, defense, special teams. Coach, how are we going to fix it? Not only are we talking about from a tactical perspective, how are we going to fix it? We're having problems with players. Maybe they're showing up late. Maybe they're not as diligent as they need to be on the practice field, in the film room. How do we resolve the issue? The head coach is the one that solves those problems and puts us back in a place where we can have success. So from a leader, a culture builder, a communicator, a problem solver, those things are necessary. But it goes beyond that, because as much as I want to say the rah-rah, the leadership skills and all that matter, you also must have a level of competence when it comes to your tactical and strategic skills, meaning you have to be able to operate and put together game plans where you consistently put the team in a position to win. Doesn't mean that you're the play caller. I want to be clear with that. It's not about calling the plays, but it's about tying the 3 phases of the game together to put your team in a position to win, meaning the offense complements the defense, which complements the special teams to give us a chance to win each and every week versus any opponent. The greatest head coaches are that. They're great tacticians and strategists that know how to work the X's and O's and the management part of the game to put the team in a position to win. Well, when you judge people off of that criteria, it should take all the play calling elements and the things that we hear when the narratives about head coach come out. We have to take those off the table, because I can tell you the job description for the head coach is so vastly different from that of a coordinator. When we think of a coordinator, and I know it's really easy to pick from the pool of coordinators because that's what we see. We see all the guys every week holding up the play card like this, talking about X, Y, and Z. This is what we're going to do, yada, yada, yada. Defense or offensive coordinators doing that over and over and over again. And while I love the theatrics and the show, the spectacle of being a play caller, that doesn't mean you're going to be a great head coach. The X's and O's have little to do with being a head coach. When we talk about the leadership, the problem solving, the culture building, that matters far more than the X's and O's and the play designs that you scribble up. Can you get everyone on a 53-man roster to buy into what we say we're going to do and do it day in, day out? That's what head coaches have to do. While we normally pick our head coaches from the pool of sexy play callers on offense and defense, I can tell you, when you interview them, it has to extend beyond the X's and O's if you're going to get it right. Finally, when it comes to that, because on our side, I feel like we're very powerful when it comes to anointing who is deserving of being a head coach. I'm going to say this again. It has nothing to do with the play calling. I can love the play calls and designs and those things, but when you become a head coach, so much of your time is occupied on other stuff. It's rare that you really get a chance to do what you've done really well. It can be done. I've seen it done. When I was a player in Green Bay under Mike Vrabel and later a scout in Seattle under Mike Vrabel, I watched him be the head coach, executive vice president, a general manager, all of those things, and offensive play caller. But to do it, it took a level of organization, and he had to delegate some of those responsibilities to be able to get it done. It can be done, but it shouldn't be the priority when we're talking about head coaching candidates. As again, I'll state, leadership, culture builder, problem solver, excellent communicator, tactician, strategist, all those things matter far more than some of the sexy stuff that we will talk about over the course of the playoffs when we see these games play out. And we see the guys with the play card doing what they do on TV. As it relates to the general manager, some of the same skills apply. Like I can talk about leadership and communicating. I can talk about problem solving and doing all of that stuff, helping with the culture. He and the head coach should work together to create the culture. But really, when you're the general manager, it is about being the best decision maker. And for a long time, when I walked around as a scout, I would talk about, oh, if I'm a great evaluator, that'll naturally put me in a position to be a general manager. No, it doesn't have to do with that. You don't have to be the greatest scout to be the best GM. But what you have to do is you have to be a very effective decision maker, meaning that you can listen to all the voices in the room. You can swish it around in your head, and you can make the best decision for the team based on the information that you're given. And the decisions that you make are not ego-driven. They are decisions that are made for the betterment of the team, meaning that if you have to make a hard decision, you have to have a hard conversation with a player, a coach, or someone else in the building. You're doing that because having this hard conversation or making this tough decision gives your team an opportunity to win at the highest level week after week. That's why your general manager not only has to be a terrific decision maker, excellent communicator who is willing to always tell the truth when it comes to the team building process. But let's talk about team building, because the general manager has to be a team builder. It's not about collecting talent. It's not about collecting those blue chip players that we talked about. It's not only about collecting blue chip players, but it's collecting the right kind of players that complement one another on the field, meaning that their games, their personalities, they all mesh together within the fabric of the team. The greatest teams put the team first. Individual agendas are secondary to what the team goals are. You have to be able to figure out which players can go along and get along with that program if you're going to operate at a high level. That doesn't mean that you can't take personalities. You can't take guys that are a little different from the rest of the group. But in their heart of hearts, they still have to value being a part of the team. The general manager's job with the help of the coaches and the scouts are to determine which guys fit, which guys make up the championship puzzle. That is what we talk about when it comes to building a team, making sure that the pieces of the puzzle fit to allow you to have the best team whenever you trot the team out there on Sundays. The final part of it, and we talked about it, is the evaluation piece, right? You have to be able to evaluate. You have to be able to know the level of talent, the talent that works. You have to be able to project out how guys will grow in the league through the development of the players with your coaching staff, your strength and conditioning staff, and those things. You have to be able to evaluate and project that out. You will never get all of the evaluations right. You will never get all of the draft picks or the free agent signings right. But what you hope is over time that there's a model that you create that allows your team to bring the overwhelming majority of correct players in to allow you to build a championship program that can succeed year after year after year. So when we talk about the general manager, we talk about decision maker, communicator, team builder, and then finally, it's about the evaluation piece. Can you evaluate enough to put the players in the right positions to allow you to build the championship puzzle? Now that we know the criteria, let's talk about some of the names that we have been hearing in the media sphere about, particularly, let's just focus on head coaches right now, because that's the easiest to kind of figure out who's who and what's what. And those are the names that we've heard. So obviously, coming into this situation in the offseason, there were a couple guys that were going to be at the top of the list, and those guys have vaulted to the top of the list. Is no surprise. Mike Vrabel, given his success with the Tennessee Titans, where a lot of people around the league felt like he did more with less, Mike Vrabel is one of the top candidates. He has a personality that you love in terms of, look, he's edgy, he's tough-minded, his teams reflect him on the field, but he is also really, really smart. He understands the rules. He understands how to take it to the line. And when we think about situational football in a league where most games are decided by 8 points or fewer, he is one of the best strategists and tacticians that you will find. He also, interestingly, he's not a play caller. He is a leader who understands how it all fits together. That's why he's loved, and he's going to have his pick of jobs. And with him, you're probably going to see him also pick his general manager. The name to keep in mind when we think about Mike Vrabel, keep Ran Carthon. He was kind of his right-hand man in Tennessee for a minute as the interim GM. I kind of think where Mike Vrabel goes, Ran Carthon could follow in some capacity, because they're that tight and they work together, and they share the same vision when it comes to the way ball should be played and the way the team should be constructed. So Mike Vrabel is one. Ben Johnson is the hottest coordinator name out there because he's fun, right? Whenever you look at the Detroit Lions and you look at their offense, so much fun to watch them with the trick plays, the job that they've done with Jared Goff, making Jared Goff a legitimate Pro Bowl player. Like, look, he was former number 1 overall pick. He'd been to the Super Bowl, but he looks even different in Detroit. Surrounded by talent, so give the credit to Brad Holmes and those things, but Ben Johnson makes the X's and O's come to life by putting those talented players in the right positions on the field. He is someone that is intriguing because everyone loves what he's done with Jared Goff, and you view him as a bit of a quarterback whisperer that can fix what ails the quarterback that he inherits. You have to be careful. The only thing that I will say is great play callers don't always translate as head coaches and great leaders. So in the interview process, it'd be really important to not only see how he'll answer the problems that the organization may have, but who's coming with him to fully build out the coaching staff and the support staff to allow the team to operate at a high level, and the people that would allow him to do what he does really well, which is create a dynamic and explosive offense. I think the $1 million question when it comes to Big Johnson, who is going to be defensive coordinator, and is that defensive coordinator capable of being the head coach of the defense so he can focus on the offense and getting the quarterback up to speed. Aaron Glenn, his compadre, his colleague on the other side of the ball, man, he put on an impressive showing week 18, the season finale against the Minnesota Vikings, really showcased, I would say, his creativity, his ability to think outside of the box, and his ability to adapt to a defense that doesn't have many of the stars that they were expected to have. He adapted. He was versatile. He is a former player who was a decorated player who has really kind of put his nose to the grindstone when it comes as a coach. First as a position coach, then as a coordinator. He has kind of seen it done. He was a big part of the culture transformation in Detroit. And I'll say this, give Dan Campbell credit, because when it didn't start out well for the Lions and their defense, Dan Campbell, former player, stuck with another former player, and Aaron Glenn, they've turned it around, and now they're the hottest team in the NFL because everyone wants to steal a little bit of what the Lions have. Aaron Glenn will be a key figure on the coaching trail because everybody wants to get a little bit of what Detroit has created. Aaron Glenn certainly can supply that. Joe Brady from the Buffalo Bills is intriguing because Joe Brady a couple of years ago was super hot, coming from LSU, where he was a pass game coordinator when Joe Burrow and the LSU Tigers ran through college football on their way to the national championship, got an opportunity to be an offensive coordinator, maybe before he was ready at Carolina, didn't go so well, took a step back, went to Buffalo, got an elevation, and what we've seen this time around, he's really done a really good job of kind of helping Josh Allen maximize his talent. Some of the stuff that we've seen in Buffalo is different than what he did in Carolina. And so it shows a growth. It shows an evolution of him as a coach and a play caller. And what you're hoping he continues to evolve when he's given the whistle as the head coach. Really talented when it comes to his offensive ingenuity. He's probably going to have an opportunity to get a head job because he's been so good with Josh Allen. You just want to make sure that he has all the requisite skills that you need to be a head coach, as opposed to being a guy that just calls the plays. That'd be really important for him in the interview process. Liam Cohen has been a name that's really buzzing. The buzz is on him because of the job that he's continued to do with Baker Mayfield. We saw Dave Canales do a great job with Baker Mayfield a season ago, and he parlayed that into the Carolina Panthers job. Liam Cohen could be the next one to parlay his success with Baker Mayfield and the Bucs into a head job. But with Cohen, you got to dig a little deeper. This is someone that worked with Sean McVay, so you get a little bit of not only the Shanahan system, but you get some of that Sean McVay leadership and culture building that has really helped the LA Rams become a perennial playoff team. Even though he had an opportunity at Kentucky as offense coordinator, didn't go so well. He's come back into the league. He's shown that he can adapt and adjust, and the work that he's done with Baker Mayfield certainly makes him a name to keep an eye on, because that success would give him plenty of opportunities to sit in front of ownership. And if he can sell the plan and vision, he is going to get one of those jobs. Two other guys that I want to mention from the offensive side of the ball, Kellen Moore and Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury, former head coach, had an opportunity to do it in Arizona. We saw what he was able to do with a number one pick in Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray wins the Offensive Rookie of the Year award, becomes a Pro Bowl player under Cliff Kingsbury's direction. The football was right around a 500 level. There were some good, there were some bad, but you wonder, what has he learned during his time away from the Cardinals when he went to SC as an assistant? Then he goes to the Commanders and works with Jaden Daniels, gets Jaden Daniels up and going. If you're a team with a quarterback situation, you look at the job that he did first with Kyler Murray, second with Jaden Daniels, you know that he can build an offense. The trick will be, can he manage and operate the whole team? And if we're talking about Chicago in particular, his work with Caleb Williams at the collegiate level, would that help him? Would that enable him to help the number one overall pick play at a high level in the Windy City? After hearing some of the things about the discipline in detail, you just want to make sure that Cliff Kingsbury can run a tight ship that allows him to get the team playing at the highest level. And Kellen Moore, what I really like about Kellen Moore, I would say, is the diversity that he's had to display as a offensive architect. You see what they were doing in Dallas under Mike McCarthy. He was a play caller there, goes to the Chargers, doesn't necessarily work out, but he had an opportunity to put together his own system, work with Justin Herbert. We saw Justin Herbert throw it all over the yard. Didn't necessarily lead to wins, but you saw the work that he did there. But now going to Philadelphia, working with a completely different style quarterback in Jalen Hurts, we have seen, I would say, the evolution of this offense, how it shifted throughout the course of the season to maximize the talent, not only of the quarterback, but of Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, utilizing the offensive line. What you're hoping is you're getting someone who is not only a master tactician and strategist, but you're getting someone that can work with the quarterback and help the quarterback out, while also building a structure that allows your best players to flourish, particularly on offense. Defense coordinator is always going to be a question who he's going to bring with him, but offensively, he's really intriguing because of the success that he's had in a few different locations. Let's go to defense and guys that you want to keep an eye on. Brian Flores. The NFL lawsuit can have an impact, but Brian Flores and the job that he's done with the Minnesota Vikings. Remember, the Minnesota Vikings are a 14-win team. No one expected them to win 14 games. We can talk about Kevin O'Connell and what he did with Sam Darnold, but this defense in Minnesota has been lights out 2 years in a row. He did it with, I would say, a deck, a small deck, a short deck, where he didn't have all the pieces in place last year in 2023. This year, they gave him a few pieces, and we've seen this defense take it up a notch. His creativity, his dynamic scheme defensively is great. But also, I would say, in talking to people, the leadership ability, the high-level thinking when it comes to putting together game plans, all of that stuff is really intriguing. The question that you have to ask is, communication-wise, had issues in Miami with Tua, took maybe a hard-line approach with a young quarterback. How does that personality fit with a potential team? He'll have to answer for that. But in terms of the experience, the leadership, the problem solving, Brian Flores has that in spades. The wild card candidate that I want to throw out there that I want everyone to pay attention to, Vance Joseph, defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos. Had an opportunity to be the head coach of the Broncos previously, didn't work out as a head coach. Had to take some steps back, become a defensive coordinator in a few different spots. But man, it has worked out. And a lot of times the second go round, you have a better understanding of what the job is. We saw Dan Quinn immediately showcase better skills as a head coach the second time around in Washington. Maybe the same could be true for Vance Joseph. When you think about Vance Joseph working with Sean Payton, being humble enough to come back and take a job where he was fired as the head coach, speaks volumes about who he is in terms of humility, but also the willing to go with Sean Payton and learn even more about offense and those things. He's a very intriguing candidate. Keep an eye on him. I just kind of have a sneaking suspicion that he could be the dark horse candidate that emerges as a guy that lands a gig and no one sees it coming. And so today, what I want to do is really take my time and talk about Black Monday, but really talk about the leadership structure in the National Football League. We talked about head coaches and what we're looking for. We talked about general managers, the leadership traits and those things that we're looking for. And we had an opportunity to touch on some of the hot coaching candidates. Next time, maybe we'll talk about the playoff preview. We'll talk a little bit about the college football world. We'll see a couple games that will certainly impact the college football playoff and kind of set the table for what the national championship game will be. But until then, I'm Bucky Brooks. This is the Bucky Brooks Show. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Continue to leave likes and comments. I love seeing your comments because I want to deliver the best show that I can for you. Until then, I will see you